The galaxy had been at peace for centuries, or so it seemed. The Galactic Empire, an interstellar regime of immense power, ruled over countless star systems, enforcing a delicate order that its citizens revered as the pinnacle of civilization. The Empire prided itself on its advanced technology, infrastructure, and governance, yet behind this polished exterior, its foundation was built on the suffering of many. Among the most oppressed were the noble planets, whose people, though rich in culture, were seen as expendable by the Empire. On the peaceful world of Vesara, life was a reflection of harmony. The planet's leaders, known as the Vesseran Council, governed with compassion, upholding values of unity, knowledge, and cooperation. Their culture was rich, their people content. But peace can sometimes be a dangerous illusion. Conflict begins. Lyra, the queen of Vesara, was once a proud symbol of this harmony. She was a diplomat, a leader who made countless efforts to maintain peace with the Empire. Her reputation was one of fairness, wisdom, and compassion. She believed that the Empire's strength could coexist with her people's values. That was until the night the Empire came for her children. In a single devastating move, the Galactic Empire seized the children of several noble planets, including Vesara. They were taken not to be held in kindness or safety, but to be used as pawns in the Empire's ongoing war. The children were transformed into soldiers, weapons to fuel the Empire's conquest, to bend their future to the will of a machine that only saw them as assets to be exploited. Among them was Lyra's own daughter, Ilara. The news hit Lyra like a sledgehammer. She had heard of the abductions, but it was always someone else's child. Now, the Empire had taken her child. Her heart shattered, but in that moment, something inside her broke free. The realization crushed her. The Empire had never been civilized. It was a lie, a facade that concealed a brutal, imperialistic agenda. Diplomacy had failed. The Empire would never see her people as equals, nor her family as precious. Ilara's abduction was a betrayal, a clear message that peace was nothing more than a tool to manipulate and control. The catalyst. Lyra knew what needed to be done. The peaceful queen, the diplomat, the negotiator, she was gone. In her place was a mother, a leader, who would stop at nothing to reclaim her child and free her people. The message was sent out. Lyra gathered the people of Vesara for a grand assembly in the heart of their capital city, under the wide, open sky. She stood before them, her voice steady but filled with burning resolve. "You captured our children. Now we stop being civilized," Lyra said, her words ringing out over the assembled crowd. "We have been patient, we have been peaceful, but no more. This empire believes it can take our children, take our homes, and take our lives, but we will show them that we are not their pawns. We are the fire that will burn their lives to the ground." There was no applause, no cheers, only the quiet murmur of understanding. The people of Vesara, who had lived under the illusion of peace for so long, now saw the truth. The Empire had never respected them. Lyra's words marked the beginning of the rebellion, a flame that would spread across the stars. But with that spark came inevitable consequences. Civilized society, as the Empire called it, was about to be shattered. No longer would Vesara remain the quiet, peaceful planet. The gloves were off, and the battle for their children would be fought at any cost. Lyra's transformation. As the resistance took shape, Lyra faced a personal transformation. She had always believed that peace was the answer, that negotiation and compromise could heal even the deepest wounds. But with her daughter in the hands of the Empire, she could no longer afford such naivety. Lyra began to train her people in combat, forming alliances with planets that had suffered under the Empire's rule. Her once gentle demeanor hardened, and her resolve grew stronger. The time for diplomatic negotiations had ended. Now, there would be no mercy for the Empire. She stood before her generals, her voice calm yet authoritative, as she laid out her strategy. "We will strike first, we will strike hard, and we will never stop until every child is free." Her eyes glinted with newfound intensity, a reflection of the rage and pain burning in her soul. No longer would Lyra be a queen who spoke softly and carried a gentle heart. Now, she would become a queen of war, leading her people into the fires of revolution. The early days of the rebellion were fraught with chaos and uncertainty. Vesara, a once tranquil planet, had been thrust into a violent struggle against the mighty Galactic Empire. The message had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The children had been taken, and the call for vengeance had been issued. Lyra, the once peaceful queen, had now transformed into the unyielding leader of a revolution. Her people, once pacifists, found strength they never knew they had, uniting behind her in the fight for freedom. The first strike. It began with a calculated attack on an Empire outpost located in the southern part of Asara. The outpost, which had once been a symbol of the Empire's peaceful control of the planet, was now the target of Lyra's forces. She had carefully planned every detail of the operation. The Empire had never anticipated an organized rebellion from a world that had prided itself on diplomacy. The night before the assault, Lyra stood at the edge of the valley overlooking the Empire's outpost. The darkened skies above her reflected the weight of her decision. The first strike was symbolic and act of defiance, a message to the Empire and to the galaxy. It would show that Asara was no longer a passive planet. Under the cover of darkness, Lyra's forces composed of former diplomats, scholars, and farmers turned warriors moved in. The ground trembled as explosions ripped through the silence, sending plumes of fire into the sky. The outpost was caught off guard. The Empire soldiers, who had never expected such fierce resistance, struggled to respond. As the battle unfolded, Lyra was at the front, her eyes cold and determined. She fought alongside her people, wielding a blade she had never used before, and her heart, though heavy with grief, was resolved in its mission. By the time dawn broke, the outpost had fallen. The rebels, though untrained in conventional warfare, had shown the Empire a glimpse of what they were capable of. Lyra stood amidst the rubble, watching as her people tended to the wounded. The victory was small but powerful. This was only the beginning. In the aftermath of the attack, Lyra found herself alone in her quarters, her hands trembling as they clutched the hilt of her blade. The cost of the battle weighed heavily on her. The bodies of the fallen rebels and the Empire soldiers alike littered the ground, and the stench of smoke and death clung to the air. As she sat in silence, her thoughts turned inward. She had once believed that there was another way, that through diplomacy and understanding, the Empire could be reasoned with. But the Empire had stolen her child, destroyed her world's innocence, and brought war to her doorstep. Now, Lyra had blood on her hands. She thought of Alara, her daughter, who had been taken by the Empire. Was this what it took to bring her back? Could she look at herself in the mirror again after the things she had done? But the memory of her daughter's face, the image of Alara being ripped from her arms, steadied her resolve. This was the price of freedom. This was the price of justice. She would carry this weight, no matter how heavy. The rebellion spreads. Word of the victory on Asara spread quickly through the galaxy. Rebel cells, long silenced by the Empire's might, began to rise up, planet after planet, star system after star system. People who had once lived under the Empire's oppressive rule began to rally to Lyra's cause. Formerly neutral worlds that had lived in fear of the Empire's wrath now saw a glimmer of hope. The galaxy's oppressed, the forgotten, the enslaved, all started to break their chains and join the revolution. The symbol of Asara's silver phoenix rising from flames became a beacon of defiance. Lyra knew she had to move quickly. Each victory was crucial to maintain momentum, to show the galaxy that the Empire was vulnerable. She sent her trusted generals Tavrin, the brilliant strategist, and Kryn, a fierce warrior whose loyalty was unquestionable on missions to secure key planets. Together, they would begin to dismantle the Empire's hold over the galaxy, one world at a time. Tavrin, with his keen mind for tactics, was tasked with organizing a series of guerrilla strikes against the Empire's supply lines. Kryn, the battle-hardened veteran, would lead a brutal assault on an Imperial stronghold on Draxia, a planet where the Empire had fortified its presence. Each strike would weaken the Empire, destabilize its infrastructure, and bring hope to the oppressed. But it wasn't just about strategy, it was about uniting people who had never fought before, training them to defend their homes, to stand tall in the face of the Empire's tyranny. Lyra's inner struggle. As the rebellion grew, so did Lyra's sense of responsibility. She was no longer just a queen. She was a symbol, the leader of a galaxy-wide uprising. But with each victory, the cost became clearer. More lives were lost in battle. More families were torn apart. Lyra found herself constantly questioning whether she had made the right choice. Could there ever be peace after all this destruction? One evening, as the stars shimmered above her, Lyra stood alone on the balcony of the rebel base. The war was just beginning. She could feel the weight of what was to come the coming battles, the sacrifice, the pain. Yet, amidst the turmoil, she couldn't ignore the growing belief that freedom, however costly, was the only way to ensure that her people and her daughter would live a life free from tyranny. We fight for more than just survival, she told herself. We fight for the future, for our children, for Alara. The aftermath of the slap. The cold, metallic walls of the throne room echoed with the sound of the prisoners' chains dragging across the floor as they were led away. Commander Drager, his face bruised from the king's slap, struggled to keep his composure. His body burned with pain, but his mind was sharp, calculating. He could feel the quiet resolve of his comrades around him. Their spirits were unbroken, even as their bodies were dragged to their cells. The king had hoped to crush them with that one act of humiliation, but Drager knew something that the king didn't. The heart of rebellion can never be defeated by a slap. The prisoners were thrown into dark, cold cells within the fortress. The damp air and the silence only served to heighten their isolation. But even in these bleak surroundings, Drager felt the stirrings of something deep within him. A strange sense of clarity, a knowing that their struggle wasn't over, that the king's reign would not last forever. It had taken centuries to build his empire, but empires built on fear always crumble. It was only a matter of time before the foundation cracked. Drager leaned against the stone wall of the cell, his mind racing. The king had made one fatal mistake. He had underestimated the power of defiance. The assassination, a shocking turn. Suddenly, an explosion rocked the fortress, shaking the walls and sending debris scattering across the dimly lit halls. Drager's heart leaped. It wasn't an attack from the prisoners. This was something else. There was a rumble that spread across the entire fortress, followed by chaos shouting, alarms blaring, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps rushing through the corridors. Through the cell bars, Drager could see figures darting in the shadows, guards scrambling to respond to the disturbance. Then, in a flash, everything grew still. A strange silence settled over the fortress, one that felt almost unnatural. Drager strained to hear anything, any sign of what had just happened. And then, as if on cue, a voice echoed through the halls. "The king is dead." The words were almost unbelievable. A shiver ran down Drager's spine. The king, the seemingly invincible ruler of the galaxy, had been assassinated. The very thought seemed too surreal, too impossible. The general's eyes locked with Drager's. "You're free, Commander. The galaxy is in turmoil. You have the opportunity to lead your people to victory, but you must act quickly. The king's death has opened the door to change, but there are others who will try to claim his throne." Lock anything. A spark of hope. The rebellion's rise. The fortress, once a symbol of the king's iron rule, had become a symbol of chaos. Alarms blared across the structure as guards scrambled to restore order, but their efforts were futile. The death of the king had shattered the heart of the empire. Factions, once too afraid to move, now sought to seize control. In the corridors and dark corners of the galaxy, whispers of rebellion grew louder. Draeger stood in the central chamber, his gaze fixed on the chaos unfolding outside. He had never imagined the king's reign would fall so suddenly, so completely. But now, the opportunity was in front of him, an opportunity to turn the tide of history. "We must act quickly," Draeger said to the general who had assassinated the king. "The galaxy is on the brink of chaos. We cannot let this chance slip through our fingers. If we do not unite, we will be lost in the turmoil." The general, still visibly shaken by his actions, nodded. "The time to fight is now. We will need every ally we can get." Draeger turned to the other prisoners, their faces filled with newfound hope. They had been broken, humiliated, but now their resolve had been reignited. They were no longer captives, they were leaders in a cause that had just been given new life. The galaxy in flux. As the news of the king's death spread throughout the galaxy, the fabric of the empire began to unravel. Planets that had once trembled under the king's rule began to stir. Alien factions who had suffered under his reign started to reconsider their alliances, and former allies of the king, those who had once thought they were too deeply entangled in his power, sought ways to distance themselves from his brutal legacy. But not everyone embraced the chaos. The king's loyalists, a fierce and determined group of elites, sought to fill the power vacuum left in his wake. They would not allow the galaxy to slip from their grasp so easily. Their goal was simple: restore the empire's order, even if it meant sacrificing countless lives to maintain control. Draeger knew that the rebellion could not stand alone. He needed allies from across the galaxy, and fast. The fate of billions hung in the balance. The general, once a trusted servant of the king, began to make contacts within the galaxy's fractured factions, forging alliances with those who sought freedom from the king's tyranny. But in this fragile moment, with the galaxy at its most vulnerable, the future remained uncertain. Would Draeger and his allies unite the fractured factions, or would the galaxy fall into civil war? It was a new dawn, and the galaxy was finally ready to chart its own future. His words were quiet, but they carried the weight of a new hope. The king's reign had ended, and with it, the galaxy's chains had been shattered.